The Holocaust. A tragedy that can never be forgotten. A dark period in our history where people were killed and tortured for who they were and what they believed in. The genocide that we said will never happen again. We are the last generation who will be able to hear directly from survivors of the Holocaust, and we must learn lessons from them to ensure that this terrible event can never be allowed to happen again. It was humbling and emotional to sit down with the survivors. It is a great responsibility for our generation to never forget. Through this documentary, we at Wilton Public Schools were able to capture the messages that survivors, their children, and grandchildren felt compelled to share for one purpose. So these stories will not be forgotten and the history will never be repeated.
Literally, the Holocaust means a fire that causes total destruction. Today, it basically refers to the systematic mass murder of European Jewry by the Germans. Some believe the Holocaust started in 1938 when an event called Kristallnacht occurred. Kristallnacht is the night of the broken glass, or shattered glass in Germany and Austria. Hundreds of Jews were killed, thousands, children among them, dragged into the streets and beaten, physically assaulted. 7,500 Jewish businesses were destroyed, Jewish hospitals and orphanages were vandalized, 1,100 synagogues were burned. Others believe that the Holocaust actually started in 1933 when Hitler and the Nazi political party assumed control of Germany and then began changing the laws and regulations for Jews living in Germany.
My grandfather was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and I don't know the exact date, but it was in 1921. And they were a very religious Jewish family, just kind of had simple lives that they led in their new country. He had 13 siblings. It was just in the rise of Nazis having power in Germany. So like, for example, on Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement for Jews, they have this ceremony where they would throw bread into the river, and they stopped doing that because the Nazis would like push Jews into the river. Things kind of ramped up incrementally for him. Like I said, the family was mostly Polish immigrants, and so when it became obvious that being German-born and having German citizenship was important, his older sister Berta had married a German-born man, and so they figured that she would be safe given that status. My grandfather didn't have the correct passport, visa papers, whatever it was, to cross the border, and so he took his sister's papers and put them in his material so he can get through. And he made it to Italy and then was captured by the Italian police and then put in kind of like a prison work camp situation.
My mother's aunt was married to a very wealthy man, and they also tried to escape, but they were very well off, and they spent a night or two at a motel on their way out, a small inn, and not like a motel as we would know it today. And they left the motel or that inn one morning, and about a block away, my mother's aunt's husband, her uncle by marriage, realized he had forgotten to say goodbye and thank you to the servants of this inn. So he left the car, and with my mother's aunt, my great aunt, in the car, and he went back just to say goodbye. While he was saying goodbye, a German plane flew over and bombed the building, and he was killed. Knowing this story, what happened to my mother's uncle, my father never from that point on ever went back. Once he left someplace, if he'd forgotten anything, he would never go back to get it. To this day, I do that. If I leave the house to go visit one of my daughters or to go on vacation and I forget anything, I will not go back and get it.
I was not sorry to leave my birthplace behind, but my mind ached when I thought of the two helpless women who had to remain at the mercy of Nazi Germany. As I walked away, my thoughts returned to the last 10 months in which my grandmother, her eyes witnessed the asylum committal of a daughter, the forced exile of a son, the arrest and banishment of the last remaining grandson. I was determined to see us all reunited again in America, and this time I thought I would enjoy watching the tears that come from happiness and relief. I would make enough money to bring them to America and would see my grandmother cry for a 5th time. But thoughts fly higher than reality, for it was to be 2 long years before I would reach America, and in that time my grandmother would die of malnutrition and Theresienstadt, and my mother, who never returned from her hospital, would die somewhere, somehow. To this day, her last resting place is unknown to me.
My name is Judith Altman, and I was born in Jasina, Czechoslovakia. I was 14 when we were occupied. There would have been a chance for me to be saved at a Kindertransport. There were possibilities, and many children were able to go to England, and at that time yet to Belgium. And my father said to me, "Judy, go, you will save your life." But I chose not to, and I'm glad I did not, because I was there to the last breath of my parents. Finally, we arrived. It was the 21st of May. It was my father's birthday. The doors open, and you see men in the striped uniform, as you saw it on the picture, running back and forth, throwing out old people. They were just throwing them out. And they say, line up in a row of 5, women separate and men separate. Out comes this tall, elegant, very well-dressed officer with his shiny boots, with a rubber stick in his hand. This is Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was called the Angel of Death. He was to determine who shall live and who shall die. He came to our row. He pointed to my niece to go to the left, to me to go to the left, and the rest of them are marching up. And as I passed my father's row, he put his hand on my head, as he did every Friday night to bless us. He said to me, "Judy, you will live." This was the last that I saw my parents and 24 members of my family. We were chosen, the 3 of us, my niece, my nephew, and me, to live, and the rest of them to death. We came to the left, and they marched to their death.
My parents lived in the town Lodz, which was the 2nd largest city in Poland, and it had a very large Jewish population. There were about 250,000 Jews living in the town of Lodz, which was basically a textile city, a lot of textile plants. My mother was a pharmacist, and my father was an attorney. They met because of my father's identical twin brother, who was also a pharmacist, and who introduced his co-worker, father's soon-to-be wife, to my father, and they started dating, and then they got married in 1938. Their families were fairly moderately well off. I really don't know much about my grandparents' occupations, but I know that they were comfortable in their lifestyle. Nice apartments. They were not, neither of the families were very religious. My mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, would go to synagogue only for the high holidays, Jewish high holidays. And again, they kept kosher, but it was really not so much religion as it was a faith. Again, my mother had two sisters and two brothers. She was the youngest of the family. One of her sisters was a dentist, and one of her brothers was a physician. I don't know what her other sister did or what her other brother did prior to the war.
We walked for hours, taking food, no matter how spoiled, from abandoned homes, relying on drinking water from fouled reservoirs, diving into mud-filled ditches, avoiding tracer bullets from strafing German fighter planes. Maybe the planes mistook us for enemy units. Maybe they just wanted some target practice, and maybe they were just having fun.
They were on a train, and one time the train, for a period of time, and the train stopped at a station, and my father went out to try to find some food. And he was coming back to the station, the train was taking off. He dropped the food and he runs after the train. His wife is on the train. And he runs, he grabs hold of a door handle, but the door is shut, it's locked, because the train is now moving. He holds on to that door handle for like 3 to 4 hours, hundreds of miles, as that train, and that's how he's holding on for dear life. And finally, the next stop the train makes, he's able to get back on the train. My mother thought he was in a different car. She had no idea that he was outside holding on for life.
My eyes searched the horizon for that last glimpse of Europe as the ship carried me to America. Standing at the rail of the Excalibur, my mind raced about. My mother, my grandmother, my uncle, my cousin, my father, my friends, my enemies, those that aided me, those that sought to stop me. I shuddered when I realized that it takes the sacrifice of a multitude of good people to alleviate the suffering caused by a virulent few. And I looked to the day when all could benefit from the benevolence in the world and experience my feelings of heartfelt humility and thankfulness.
But I snuck out as we were coming into the New York harbor. This is like a movie, and I saw the most beautiful thing in the world, the Statue of Liberty. I had no idea at that time what it represented, what it meant. But liberty, that's really what it was. So
that was the end of his memoir. Now there is an epilogue here that the man you have just read about, this was in 1977, can be found in the executive headquarters of a large footwear manufacturer. He has worked with this company for over 30 years, beginning as a part-time shoe salesman. He lives in a cozy colonial home in Fairfield County. He has 2 married children and 3 grandchildren. He has many more grandchildren now and a great-grandchild. In his leisure time, he takes evening adult classes, goes swimming, attends the theater and the opera, and assumes an active role in his synagogue. At home, he can watch a documentary on television, listen to Il Trovatore on the radio, and read a book about Kissinger all at the same time. He enjoys sightseeing, walks on the beach, his children, and most of all, being with his wife. The former Beatty Heinemann. Excuse me.
It's very important to me that young people understand what happened and that it was allowed to happen. that, 6 million people and other people, other than Jews, there were gypsies, there were homosexuals, there were political people who, were socialists or communists. They were all killed in the camps. And I have to say, I have several friends who survived, and they speak to schools and universities because we just don't want people to forget something.
I think I just want to go back to that idea of continuing to tell the story, to be aware of the slow creep. It's like the frog boiling in water. If you put it in room temperature, it's fine. If you put it in boiling water, it'll die. But if you slowly turn up the temperature, it'll boil to death. And I think that my grandparents and father's telling of this story has made me keenly aware of being sensitive to when those temperatures get turned up, and therefore how to find tactics to turn them down. Yeah, and I actually see it more in now times, less of a Jewish issue, an anti-Semitic issue, and more of an othering issue. So that Hitler's main point was Jews don't belong to this country. They are foreign, they are parasites here. And anytime someone is othered, that's that first temperature tick as far as I see. I think anything we can do to embrace and incorporate the other, I think is much better than separating.
So it's more of an overarching, so the issue is bigger than just Jews.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never forget for anyone ever. In other words, it's not just about presenting this specific thing from happening to this specific people in this specific way. It's about the structure never happening again.
I said, if I make it, and I'm fortunate enough, I will tell the world and tell what animosity, what hate, what discrimination, intolerance can do. And that's what I'm doing. I speak last year 51 schools. Years before, I reached 8,000 students last year. You are about the 11th in this school year already. And that's what I do. I try to tell the young people what has to be watched, and be careful. Don't listen what other people do. Read by yourself, and if you can, write letters, do everything to convince yourself that what is the wrong thing and what is the right thing.
I guess I'd like to say that I was unfortunately not old enough to really appreciate who my grandmother was before she passed away, and the experiences that she went through, and why she was the way she was, and it was also hard for me to appreciate my dad for similar reasons, and I think that this understanding so much more about what happened and what informed their experiences and the way that they were able to cope and to move forward are now just really powerful for me, and I hope to pass that down to my kids, and I hope that there's something about understanding that we can glean from this, about empathy, about never really knowing what somebody has experienced, and maybe not prejudging, because the behavior was certainly not expected at times. My grandmother was irreverent, and she was very funny. And I think as a nation, we really need to look at where we're going in terms of our
ability to talk to each other and to empathize and to think of ourselves, to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think that the more that we get away from that, the farther we are from civil discourse, and the closer we are to being a country where things deteriorate and civility deteriorates. And so I hope that with projects like this and with your work, and that we keep the dialogue open, and that we keep learning, and that we keep talking about these things. Because let us as a nation, let us in the world never repeat this. And let's try to stop it where it's happening now.